I was 28 when I finally snapped. My boss, Gerald, wasn't just a bad manager, he was a master of psychological torture, and for 3 long years, he made my life a living hell. But what he didn't know was that every cruel word, every impossible demand, was just fueling the fire of my eventual, spectacular revenge. At first, I told myself he was just tough, one of those old-school types who believed in pushing people to their limits. But no, Gerald wasn't tough. He was a narcissist, a control freak, and worst of all, he had this chilling, personal vendetta against me. It all started the day I finally got promoted. I'd been grinding for years, putting in extra hours, fixing other people's mistakes, practically keeping the department afloat while Gerald took all the credit. When the higher-ups finally recognized my effort, giving me a well-deserved raise and a new title, I made the mistake of thinking I'd won. Gerald didn't take it well. His passive-aggressive comments started immediately. Big title, huh? Let's see if you can handle it. At first, I laughed it off, but soon, his little challenges turned into outright sabotage. My workload doubled overnight. He started assigning me projects with impossible deadlines, expecting me to work late into the night while my coworkers, some with less experience and lower titles, got away with doing the bare minimum. "Ethan, I need this entire report rewritten by tomorrow morning," he'd say at 5 p.m., a smug grin spreading across his face as he handed me a stack of files. "Shouldn't be too hard for someone with your new position." I put up with it at first. I told myself it was temporary, that he'd get over whatever grudge he had against me, but it only got worse. He started throwing me under the bus in meetings, blaming me for mistakes I hadn't made. He'd change project requirements at the last minute and then act shocked when I couldn't keep up. The stress was a physical weight. I was barely sleeping, snapping at my girlfriend, missing family events. And the worst part? He knew exactly what he was doing. He savored it. One day, I finally confronted him in his office. "Gerald, I need to talk to you about my workload. I'm drowning here." He didn't even look up from his computer. "That's what the big leagues are like, Ethan. Maybe you're just not cut out for it." That was the moment something clicked in my head. A cold, hard clarity washed over me. He wasn't going to stop. No amount of effort, no amount of proving myself, was ever going to be enough. But quitting wasn't an option. Not yet. So, I started documenting everything. Every unreasonable request, every time he changed project requirements, every time he blamed me for something out of my control. I saved emails, captured Slack messages, and even recorded a few of our conversations when he got particularly nasty. It was all going into a meticulously organized folder. Then came the final straw. Gerald called me into his office one Friday afternoon, that same smug grin on his face. "Ethan, I've got a new challenge for you." I already knew whatever it was going to be awful. "I need you to put together a full presentation for the board meeting on Monday, from scratch. You'll need to work all weekend." My heart pounded against my ribs. "Gerald, the board meeting presentation takes months to prepare. That's not possible." His grin widened, a cruel twist of his lips. "That's why I gave it to you. Let's see if you can handle it." I stared at him, trying to control the rage boiling inside me. He wasn't just setting me up to fail, he was enjoying it. And that's when a quiet, dangerous resolve settled in my chest. "Sure thing, Gerald," I said, forcing a nod. He smirked, thinking he'd won. He had no idea. That weekend, I didn't touch a single slide for his presentation. I didn't open a single file. Instead, I finalized my escape plan. Over the past month, I had been quietly preparing to leave. The documentation I had gathered on Gerald's abuse wasn't just for my records. It was leverage. I had also been networking, reaching out to old colleagues and mentors, testing the waters for new opportunities. And then there was my side project, a small consulting business I had been running on the side. I hadn't been ready to go all in before, but Gerald had pushed me past my breaking point. Sunday night, I typed up my resignation letter. No emotion, no explanation, just the chilling facts. I printed it, sealed it in an envelope, and set it on my desk, ready for Monday morning. I walked into the office that day feeling lighter than I had in months. Gerald was already in a mood, barking at people, making his usual rounds of intimidation. When he saw me, he smirked. "Hope you're ready, Ethan. Board meeting's in an hour. Let's see if you actually pulled this off." I smiled back. "Oh, I'm ready." We all walked into the conference room. The executives were already seated, waiting for the presentation. Gerald took his place at the head of the table, nodding at me to start. I stood up, walked to the screen, and clicked the remote. The screen stayed black. I turned back to the room, feigning confusion. That's strange. It's almost like no presentation was prepared. Gerald's smirk faltered. "What?" I turned to him. "Yeah, I didn't do it." A hush fell over the room, thick with tension. Gerald's face turned beet red. "Excuse me?" I pulled the resignation letter from my pocket and slid it across the table toward him. "I quit." He grabbed the envelope, barely processing what was happening. "You can't just quit in the middle of a board meeting." I shrugged. "Looks like I just did." He was sputtering now, his voice a low growl. "Ethan, be serious. You're making a mistake. This kind of stunt could ruin your career." I laughed. "No, Gerald. Staying here would ruin my career." I turned to the executives. "By the way, if anyone wants to know why I quit, I've documented every impossible task I was assigned. Every time Gerald sabotaged me, and every time he took credit for my work. I'll be happy to share." The executives exchanged glances, their faces unreadable. Gerald opened his mouth, but no words came out. He knew I had him. Completely. I grabbed my bag and walked out. I didn't bother looking back. The adrenaline surged through me, a powerful, exhilarating wave. My heart pounded in my chest, but I kept walking, head held high. The office was quiet, too quiet. People had clearly heard something going down. A few coworkers glanced up from their desks, their eyes flickering with curiosity, but no one said a word. Not yet. I made my way back to my desk, grabbed my personal belongings, and powered down my computer. No hesitation, no second thoughts. I had given that company everything, and all it had given me was stress, sleepless nights, and a boss who delighted in making me miserable. Not anymore. As I stuffed the last of my things into my bag, I heard hurried footsteps behind me. "Ethan, wait." I turned to see Sarah, one of my closest coworkers, rushing toward me. She looked somewhere between impressed and worried. "Tell me you didn't just do what I think you did," she whispered. I gave her a lopsided grin. "Oh, I definitely did." She stared at me for a moment, then exhaled. "Well, you really just walked out on Gerald like that?" "He's been pushing me for months," I said. "He wanted me to fail. I just decided to let him have what he wanted, in the worst way possible." Sarah glanced toward the conference room where muffled voices, some panicked, some furious, filtered through the walls. She shook her head. "I can't believe you actually did it." Then she smirked. "I mean, I can, but still." I chuckled. "Hey, I left behind some documentation if anyone wants to take a look." Her smirk widened. "You mean receipts?" I shrugged, nonchalant. "Let's just say there's a very detailed folder with timestamps, emails, and voice recordings in my drive. If it happens to find its way to HR, well, that's not my problem anymore." Sarah let out a low whistle. "Gerald's going to implode." "Good," I said simply. She nodded, glancing around. "So, what now? Got another job lined up?" I slung my bag over my shoulder. "Better. I'm starting my own company." Sarah's eyebrows shot up. "No way." "Way." She let out a short laugh. "Okay, that is next-level revenge." I grinned. "It gets better." Sarah crossed her arms, intrigued. Do tell. I glanced around to make sure no one else was listening, then leaned in. I've been working on a consulting business for a while now. The best part? I already have a few potential clients lined up. Her eyes widened. Ethan, that's huge. And here's the cherry on top, I said. Guess who some of those clients are? She blinked. Wait, are you telling me? Yep, I said, grinning. Companies that work directly with this one. I'm about to be in a position where I can take clients away from Gerald, the same ones he never let me work with because he wanted all the credit. Sarah let out a low, dramatic gasp. Ethan, that is diabolical. I shrugged. Just business. Before she could say anything else, a loud, furious voice echoed from the conference room. Where is he? Sarah and I both turned toward the sound. Gerald. A second later, the man himself stormed out, his face a grotesque mask of rage. His beady eyes scanned the office until they locked onto me. Ethan, he barked, marching toward me. My office, now. I didn't move. I don't work for you anymore, Gerald. You think you can just walk away after what you pulled in there? His voice was dangerously low, almost a growl. You humiliated me. I smiled. No, Gerald. You humiliated yourself. His fists clenched at his sides. You're going to regret this. I tilted my head. Oh, and how exactly are you planning to make me regret it? His jaw worked, but he had no answer. He couldn't fire me. He couldn't threaten me with my job. He had lost all control. That's when I saw it in his eyes, the realization, the fear. I took a step closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear. You spent months trying to break me. Instead, you pushed me into something better. And now I get to watch as your career burns itself to the ground. His face paled slightly. I smiled. Then I turned and walked out of that office for the last time. As I stepped onto the street, I pulled out my phone and made a call. Hey, I said when the person on the other end picked up, I'm officially free. Let's get started. Because Gerald had spent so much time making my life miserable, he never noticed that I had been building something for myself. And now it was time to make sure he felt every bit of what he had put me through. And I had the perfect plan to do it. The next few days were a blur of excitement, nervousness, and a touch of disbelief. I hadn't expected things to fall into place so quickly, but once I'd taken the leap, everything started to move in the right direction. The first thing I did after leaving that toxic office environment was call in every favor I could. I reached out to a few former clients from my consulting side gig, reminding them of the value I had brought to their businesses. I set up meetings with a couple of industry contacts I'd been nurturing for months. And I got to work on a brand new website for my company, designing it to not only showcase my skills, but to subtly position myself as the one who could help companies clean up the messes that Gerald had created for them. It wasn't long before I had clients on board, and the money started rolling in. It felt surreal. Each new contract was a small victory, but it was also a reminder of everything Gerald had taken from me. He had kept me under his thumb for years, and now I was finally free, building something that was mine. But as my consulting business began to take off, something darker loomed in the background. Gerald. I knew he wouldn't take kindly to me walking out. I anticipated he'd try to retaliate in some way, but I hadn't anticipated just how far he'd go. It started with emails. Every day, I'd open my inbox to find multiple messages from Gerald. Some were professional, others desperate. He was trying to salvage his reputation with the higher-ups, using my departure as the central theme of his explanations. In one email, he referred to my resignation as a loss for the company. And in another, he claimed that Ethan's inability to handle the pressure of leadership was why I'd left. He went so far as to name-drop me in meetings, painting me as a disgruntled employee who couldn't handle the work. It was transparent. Everyone who had worked with me knew I was good at my job. I didn't need Gerald's approval to succeed. But there was something he was missing, something that was beginning to take shape in my mind. I smiled as I clicked open one of his more recent emails. This one addressed to several of my former colleagues. It was full of half-truths, blaming my sudden departure on my supposed failure to meet expectations. What he didn't know, though, was that I had been CC'd on those emails. I didn't respond directly. Instead, I did something even better. I sent my own email to the same people. I sent them the evidence I had been collecting over the years: documents, screenshots, and voice memos. Gerald's sabotage, his tendency to take credit for my work, his manipulation and bullying. I didn't need to slander him in the email. All I had to do was show the truth. The fallout was immediate. I started getting phone calls from colleagues I hadn't spoken to in months. Some of them thanking me for the information, others apologizing for not realizing what I'd been dealing with. They were shocked by what they learned, and some were even more shocked by how long Gerald had gotten away with it. The company's HR department was flooded with complaints, not just from me, but from others who had been too afraid to speak up. And Gerald was starting to lose his grip. He'd been the king of his little fiefdom for so long that he never saw it coming. My resignation wasn't just a personal loss for him. It was a blow to his empire. The higher-ups who had once blindly followed his leadership were now questioning him. They started reaching out to me, not for revenge, but for advice on how to clean up the mess he'd left behind. And here's where it gets really sweet. Gerald, in his desperation, made the fatal mistake of reaching out to me. It was a Friday afternoon when I got the call. My phone buzzed and the name that appeared on the screen made my stomach clench. Gerald. I stared at it for a moment before answering. What do you want, Gerald? There was a long pause on the other end. When he finally spoke, his voice was strained, almost pleading. Ethan, look, we need to talk. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of everything I had been through with him. I had to admit, there was a part of me that wanted to gloat. But that wasn't why I had left in the first place. I had left to build something better. Talk about what? I asked, keeping my tone cool. I want to make things right, he said, stumbling over his words. I know I messed up. I know you're upset, and maybe I pushed you too far, but we can fix this, Ethan. You and me, we can. I cut him off. Gerald, I'm not interested in fixing anything with you. You don't get to call the shots anymore. I'm not going back. I'm not working with you. I don't want your apology. His tone shifted, becoming more aggressive. You think you can just walk away from everything I gave you? Everything I did for you? You think you're going to be successful without me? I leaned forward, my voice steady but firm. Everything you gave me? You mean the impossible tasks, the sabotage, the emotional manipulation? Yeah, I'm doing just fine without you, Gerald. Maybe you should have thought about that before you ruined every chance we had to work together. His silence told me everything. He had no idea how to respond. He had never been the one to apologize, never been the one to admit fault. But that was the problem with Gerald. He thought he could control everyone and everything. He had underestimated me. And now, as my business continued to grow, as I moved further away from the wreckage of my old life, I realized something. The true revenge wasn't in making him pay for everything he had done. It was in thriving without him. It was in watching him flounder while I built something real. I hung up the phone. But my victory wasn't over yet. I still had one last move to make. It was time to take what I had built and show Gerald exactly what he had lost. And that's exactly what I did. A few weeks passed and things at my company were booming. I had officially surpassed the income I'd made working under Gerald. And I had more clients than I could handle. The freedom to build something on my own without his interference was more satisfying than I could have ever imagined. But I wasn't finished. There was one last part of my plan I hadn't fully executed yet. Showing Gerald what he had lost. It wasn't about revenge in the way people typically think. No, it was something much more subtle, much sweeter. One afternoon, I got an invitation to a corporate networking event in the city. It was the kind of event where big companies sent their top leaders to mingle with smaller, rising businesses. A perfect opportunity for me to meet new clients, but it also presented an opportunity for one final conversation with Gerald. As soon as I entered the room, I spotted him standing by the bar, looking exactly like the man I remembered, except now there was a certain tension in his posture. He hadn't seen me yet. I waited for a moment before walking over. "Gerald," I said, my voice calm, a hint of satisfaction threading through my tone. He turned, and his eyes immediately widened. For a moment, he didn't say anything. Then his face flushed red and he forced a strange smile. "Ethan, I didn't know you were going to be here." I let the awkwardness settle for a second before responding. "Yeah, well, it's funny. I got invited and I thought it would be a good way to see how things are going with the company, the company you left me with." Gerald shifted uncomfortably, his gaze darting around the room as if looking for an escape, but there was nowhere to run. I had him cornered. "I see your company's doing well," he said, his voice thick with a mix of begrudging respect and annoyance. I smiled, a slow, deliberate grin. "It's going great, actually. We've grown by 40% since I left. Just signed a huge deal with a startup that's expanding globally. I'm in a much better position now than I was before, and it feels so good." The words stung him, and I could see it. Gerald, the guy who had thought I was nothing without his leadership, was realizing just how wrong he had been. I could feel his anger simmering beneath the surface. But I wasn't done. "I just wanted to stop by," I said casually, letting the weight of my words settle in. To see how you were doing, and to let you know that I'm doing fine without you. You really did me a favor when you kept piling on those impossible tasks. It was exactly what I needed to push me to start something better." There was the jab. Gerald's eyes flickered with a mixture of rage and regret. "You think you're better off without me? You needed me," he spat, his voice rising slightly. "Without me, you'd still be stuck in that miserable job. You'd still be under my thumb, just like everyone else." I took a deep breath, keeping my composure. "I don't think you get it, Gerald. The truth is, you were never the reason I stayed. You were the reason I left. I stayed for the work, for the people I could help. But you made it unbearable. You pushed me until I had no choice but to move forward on my own." His face twisted in frustration. "You wouldn't have succeeded without me," he muttered, more to himself than to me. "You're nothing without me." I could have gotten into a long argument with him, but I didn't want to waste my time. Instead, I leaned in a little, my voice steady, but sharp. "You know what's funny? I was nothing without you. But now I'm everything. And you? You're stuck. People are leaving. Clients are backing out. You might want to start looking for something else." I turned to walk away, savoring the moment, knowing that I'd finally truly broken free. Gerald's empire wasn't invincible. It had crumbled under the weight of his arrogance, and now it was just a shell of what it once was. Before I walked out of the event, I glanced back at him one last time. He was standing there, still fuming, but now surrounded by a group of people who were clearly starting to question his leadership. The final, bitter truth hit me then. All he had tried to control, all the fear he had instilled in me, was nothing but smoke and mirrors. He wasn't a king. He was just a man afraid of losing his power. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years, and stepped out into the night. My revenge was complete, not in taking something from him, but in building something that could never be taken.